Now, I would like to invite Chairman for the Mayors Forum, Mr. Desmond Lee, to deliver the closing address. Minister, please.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long day, but a very fruitful discussion. I hope that at the sidelines of the City Summit, you have many opportunities to interact with each other, share experiences, exchange contacts, do things together, learn together. Indeed, that's how Singapore has come to be. We've always learned from the best around the world, adapted it for our use, and if it works, we expand it. If it doesn't, we understand why, and we try to do better. And I hope that this spirit is something that all of us as city leaders embrace, and that is the raison d'etre for the World City Summit. It has indeed been a very engaging and fruitful discussion at this year's World City Summit, Mayors Forum. We discussed two very important issues today: digitalization and decarbonization. Digitalization is a very significant trend, a very powerful trend that enables cities, enables countries to progress. But as mayors have discussed, there are downsides, there are risks, there are blind sides that we need to take care of. On the other hand, decarbonization is probably the single most important thing that all of us and all countries on this planet have to focus on in the decades ahead. It is an existential threat to countries big and small, and future generations unborn will depend on the work of this generation and the next to ensure they have a livable future. But linking the two, digitalization can enable our efforts at decarbonization. For example, mayors shared about how digital tools enable you to measure your energy usage, your water usage, so that you can decarbonize, be more resource intensive in terms of reduction of usage as possible. So digitalization plays a part in our decarbonization journey. Indeed, mayors have shared many useful ideas. You've given us very interesting perspectives, which we look forward to diving deeper into. And the white spaces in between the summit allow us to do so. So let me say a very big thank you to all of you for your contributions. We've learned a lot from you, and we hope you found the session insightful as well. I would like to thank our moderators, Mr. Greg Clark and Mr. Aaron Manyam, for smoothly steering a dynamic session and for extracting the key learning points for all of us. Thank you to both of you. Now, as we round up today's Mayors Forum, allow me to share just a few brief reflections. While I was very inspired by the diversity of views which were shared, and views from almost every continent, cities in every continent, what struck me most was that despite our differences, there are some very important common threads that run through our experiences. And we are from cities. We represent urban centers, big and small. And one of these important common threads is the role of our city, our built environment, the hardware of our city, in our decarbonization and digitalization efforts. Indeed, the World Green Building Council has estimated that buildings and construction account for close to 40% of global emissions. And in my opening address, I shared that cities are the main sources of carbon emissions, and upon our shoulders, and that of city leaders around the world, rests the responsibility of a large part of decarbonization for our Earth's future. So decarbonizing our built environment, the way we build our city, construct and maintain our buildings, is critically important. But one challenge that the built environment and urban sector faces is that it involves many players along the value chain. And sometimes as city leaders, as mayors, even as national leaders, we feel that we don't have everything under our control, and we have to rely not just on levers, but also on many, many stakeholders in the space. From developers and consultants to builders, to people who manage and facilitate buildings, and eventually the building users themselves, whether corporate or residential. We therefore need a holistic approach that aligns efforts all along this value chain to achieve the greatest impact in the decarbonization in our cities. This, of course, means we need to look at the whole life cycle of buildings, from planning and design to development and maintenance, and accounting, as Dr. Chong Kun Hin said earlier, for both embodied as well as operational carbon emissions. Another challenge that I think we all collectively face is the decarbonization of older buildings in our cities, which were often not designed with sustainability in mind. They were designed and built in a different time, in a different era. It can be more difficult and costly to retrofit existing buildings than to design a new green building from scratch, or for that matter, to design and build a whole new green city, for that matter. Here in Singapore, by 2025, in fact, more than half of our buildings will be above 30 years old. So this will be a big challenge for us. And I'm sure many of you face similar, if not greater challenges, because many of your cities are much older. We've therefore worked closely with industry partners here in Singapore to refresh our Green Building Master Plan, and we have 3 targets which we call 80, 80, 80 in 2030. We like numbers in Singapore, and we use that as targets. The first 80 is to green 80% of our buildings by the end of this decade, by 2030. The second 80 is for 80% of our new buildings, whatever they are, new buildings, public sector, private sector, from 2030 onwards to be super low energy buildings. And the third 80 is for our best-in-class buildings to achieve 80% improvement in energy efficiency in 2030 compared to when we first started our green building journey in 2005. So 3 targets, and as a city, we want to actively work towards them. But to achieve these ambitious goals, we need a mix of strategies, from increasing minimum environmental standards for buildings to incentivizing further improvements at the top end through our Green Mark accreditation scheme so that we bring in innovation, technology, and research to push the boundaries. But beyond decarbonization, which is critically important for all of us, digitalizing our built environment will also be important for our cities. Digital technologies can help us to build and maintain our cities and ensure that there's accountability when we say we've sought to decarbonize them. Sensor networks and data analytics, for instance, can help us to do predictive maintenance, intervene before problems occur. Such technologies are even more powerful when we can integrate different digital systems together. In Singapore, if you have the next few days to tour the city, go to the northeast. We're developing an entire district known as the Punggol Digital District as a living laboratory for smart urban systems. It features an open digital platform which will connect different district management systems and allow them to communicate and complement one another. For example, by collating data about the weather, about power consumption, and human footfall from across the whole district, we can adjust our lighting and district cooling systems accordingly to optimize energy use and reduce our carbon footprint. Beyond the infrastructure and the hardware, digitalization and decarbonization are just as much about the hardware of our city, our people. Throughout our discussions earlier, I heard many city leaders sharing inspiring examples of how you've partnered citizens and businesses and NGOs to jointly develop plans and solutions for your city that can meet real needs on the ground. And city leaders are grounded in the experiences and your needs of your people. Indeed, decarbonizing our city is not just about designing greener buildings or using more sustainable construction material. It is also about encouraging our people to reduce our carbon footprint by using less energy and choosing more sustainable lifestyles. It's one thing to build, it's one thing to dictate by policy, moving organizations, but ultimately it's about human behavior. And that is something we have to actively work on. Persuasion, moral suasion, incentivization, internalization of this conviction about the importance of decarbonization. And so here in our city, to complement our Green Building Master Plan, we also launched a program which we call Sustainability in Singapore. Under this program, we reach out to building users. No matter what we impose on the building, we still go into the building and we find the users. We recruit people from the building user community to become green ambassadors, and we empower them to work from within their organizations, living and working in those buildings. run effective campaigns to spur the rest of their organization, their colleagues, their bosses, their subordinates, to reduce their energy use at the individual and organizational level. Now, similarly, when it comes to digitalization, digital tools are only effective if designed with their users in mind. The social perspective of digitalization, not just leaving no one behind, but ensuring that the users find the user interface intuitive and helpful. Because platforms, while they are means to an end, can sometimes drive outcomes that are intended or unintended. So for instance, what we're doing here on an island, we find that when you construct a building, because of many, many regulatory requirements imposed by specialist agencies, building consultants and building designers and professionals have to consult many, many government departments. And I'm sure that's the same in your city too. People who build buildings have to reach out to fire safety regulators, to people who handle greenery, to people who handle sustainability, transport, and so on and so forth. This can be cumbersome and inefficient and sometimes leads to wastage. And so we are working across the agencies and with industry partners to consolidate and to streamline the different approval processes into a single online portal, which we call CornetX, and it should come operational next year. With this system, building professionals can better coordinate their design to meet different regulatory requirements of our city-state and work a lot more productively. So what they'll do is they'll send their plans to one portal instead of 5 or 10 organizations. All the organizations will work back end and respond in one voice through 3 important gateways rather than a plethora of different engagements. And so this regulatory efficiency, driven by the fact that we're a city and a state, enables us to try to achieve or use digitalization to drive efficiency as well as decarbonization. Now, many city leaders earlier in the first session shared with us about how digitalization can inevitably leave certain vulnerable communities behind. People with special needs, the elderly, the vulnerable communities. But I would posit to say that digital tools enable cities, not just city governments, but also the stakeholders in the city, to better support and enable the vulnerable. For example, in Singapore, again, because of the fact that there are many, many organizations that are trying to help the vulnerable in specialized fields, you find that families who are vulnerable, low income, with lots of difficulties, often have to navigate the social sector, navigate many agencies. I'm sure in your cities too, you find that marginalized or vulnerable communities have to find help from city agencies, from NGOs, from religious and secular groups, and so on. And that bandwidth tax can be burdensome on the vulnerable. And then you fear imposing a digitalization burden on them too. But what we're trying to do is to use digitalization as a spine to enable the hardware to work better, for the heart to beat as one. Through digital tools that we've unified across government agencies, with the consent of vulnerable families, we now seek to aggregate the information in secure portals, enabling social service agencies, enabling government agencies to have a 360-degree view of the people that we are serving together. And then through an associated system, enabling us to coordinate our support for these families, allowing us to journey with these families on a single unified progress roadmap. And so in a way, our early attempts to try to use digitalization to empower the support of the most vulnerable. In fact, as we digitalize our city, we must strive to keep our digital transformation inclusive and avoid digital divides in our society. That resonated strongly in our first half of today's session. And this means taking the effort to equip our people with the right skills so that they can make the most of these digital tools instead of seeing this as a wall in front of them. Some groups, like our elderly, may need a bit more help to do so, and we should support them in their transition in a way that they're comfortable with. Now, to conclude, I think it's clear from our discussions this year that in trying to build more livable and sustainable cities, whether through digitalization, decarbonization, or other efforts, both the hardware, the physical stuff, as well as the hardware, the soft stuff, emotional stuff, are very important in our cities. And as city leaders today, you've shared many useful ideas on how we can work on both aspects of our cities. So thank you once again for your insights. Now, while this marks the end of this year's Mayors Forum, I hope this session, along with the rest of the World City Summit, will spark further conversation, learning, and collaboration among all of us. Let us also look forward to the 2023 Mayors Forum, our 12th edition, which will be held in the beautiful city of Seoul, the 2018 Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize laureate city. Mayor Oh Se-hoon has given us a sneak peek of what we can expect, and we hope that all of us can collectively learn from Korea as well. So we hope to see you all again in the city of Seoul next year. Thank you, and have a good summit ahead.